Whenever you're ready. Or I should say, William Wilberforce.
I, William Wilberforce, am for the abolishment of the Atlantic slave trade. I believe that slavery should be put to an end because it is not only a form of torture, it also spreads disease, is unnecessary, and is much different than the slavery in Africa. To begin, the first reason slavery should be abolished is to prevent the spread of disease. From 1501 to 1666, a total of 12,521,336 slaves were shipped to Europe. On average, 1/3 of those slaves were dead before they even reached Europe due to the diseases that ran rampant on the ships. These diseases exist due to the unethical conditions on the ships that transport them from their homes to Europe. Slaves are crammed together and unable to defecate and urinate properly, leaving them covered and surrounded by their own waste, which is a breeding ground for disease. The infected slaves are thrown overboard, but that doesn't mean that the illness won't reach Europe and infect the population. Therefore, we must end slavery not only to end the cruelty to slaves, but also to protect ourselves from the deadly diseases that are carried by slaves. Furthermore, even though slavery is a common practice in Africa, it is much different than that of what we participate in. Opposed to our own slavery, slavery in Africa is utilized as an ethical way of punishing people. Slaves here in Europe are ripped from their homes and families for no reason other than our selfishness, and are forced to work until death, whereas slaves in Africa are enslaved for valid reasons as a form of punishment, which even then is still much more humane than European slavery. Even though slaves located in Africa are still slaves, they are well treated, are allowed to keep their identities, and sometimes even marry into their owning families. Additionally, slaves live lives of pain and agony. If they aren't born into the barbaric trade, slaves are ripped from their homes and families, and then are forced to work away their lives. And for what? The selfish, inhumane, and just plain wrong addiction to money and power that we have. Finally, it is understood that slavery has greatly increased the wealth and economic growth of European countries. However, instead of trading human beings, we can begin to trade other luxury goods and expensive materials. But if trading slaves for work and sexual abuse is an unfortunate necessity in our own modern day, we could trade prisoners as slaves, rather than the free, innocent African individuals who have every right as us to be free. This would not only be fair to everyone, it would also cause the price of slaves to drop as well. To conclude, I, William Wilberforce, believe that slavery should be abolished for a number of reasons. Slavery spreads illness, is a form of torture, is unethical compared to African slavery, and slaves are extremely mistreated. And finally, there are alternatives to enslaving innocent individuals.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the pause. Okay.
For visual aids.
Yes, you want to show us your visual aids? Okay.
And then I have some visual aids. So here's a picture of some ship owners throwing ill slaves overboard and letting them drown. And then here's a picture of my dear friend Captain Kimber beating a female slave to death because she refused to dance topless on his ship.
Wow. Honesty is not a good policy.
And these are the conditions that slaves live in. These tiny little lines are slaves and how they're crammed together on the ships.